Hi, everybody. This is Patti Negri. Welcome to the witching hour. Yes, that hour of the day when the veil is thin and magic happens. I have some very accomplished magic for you today. I am truly honored to have on Frater Barrabbas. He is an author, a practitioner of witchcraft and ritual magic. He has lots of great books out, one of which I have, Elemental Powers for Witches. But let me bring him on so he could tell you all about. Thank you, Frater. Thank you so much for coming on my show.
You're welcome. It's
So,
very good to be here, Patty.
yay! And well, we are very happy to have you. I like this, and we had a question even before we went on. Like you said, you this on the book it says bring element-based ceremonial magic into your modern witchcraft. So, and you said you are not a ceremonial magician. And then I'm going, what is it? Elemental. So, for my people out there who might be confused, like I sometimes often get confused. What is the difference? What kind of magic do you practice? What is it that is or isn't ceremonial or elemental based or
Well, for a number of years, I was kind of not really with the overall occult community or the community of magicians and ceremonial magicians and all that. So I was kind of doing my own thing for quite a number of years, and then I kind of came out of the closet with the larger community of occultists. And when they looked over some of my rituals and some of the other stuff that I had done, they basically said to me, um, "Your magic stinks of witchcraft." And when they said that, I felt that, hey, it was a badge of honor. I was like, yeah, yeah, it stinks of witchcraft. I'll go with that. But they meant it as an insult. Meaning that the structures and a lot of what I do is really an extension of witchcraft lore. Um, the thing is that I started doing this stuff a long, long, long time ago. I mean, we're talking about the early 70s. 1970s, people were smoking pot and taking LSD, and it was the age of Aquarius and all of that stuff. And Kruskin, was delighting people with exhibitions of ESP and all of that. And I was starting to get into magic and witchcraft. And there weren't a lot of books. I mean, what some of the better books were real expensive, and I didn't have the money for it. So I had to make do a lot of the times with what was really available. And so I basically cobbled together something extending off of basic witchcraft lore. I had Paul Hewson's book on mastering witchcraft and Lady Sheba's Book of Shadows. I had not been initiated into witchcraft at this particular point, and I wouldn't be for almost 5 years. But I basically was able to go far enough to develop my own system of magic, or the very rudimentary beginnings of it. And then after I got involved with an Alexandrian coven, I was initiated, and I basically went through all 3 degrees in about 18 months, which is pretty fast.
very fast?
Um, I was the prodigal son. um, and the coven was really an incredible place, an incredible experience. And then within 4 years, it had become the coven from hell. And I had to leave, and as did many other people. And my high priestess and high priest became fundamentalist Christians. And in fact, my high priest produced a book called Wicca's Satan's Little White Lie
Oh,
by and teamed up with Chick Publications and went on the road to tell everybody about how basically witches are all dupes of Satan. And so he went that way, and I went this way. As far as what ritual magic um, has a basic concept to it, and that is that you can use scripts or not. You can get very elaborate, or you can be very simple with the structures of what you're working with. Either approach is good, but the primary thing is that you work and formulate your magic while doing a Godhead assumption. So the ceremonialists, who basically are of the Abrahamic faith, and although not all of them, um, believe that you need to petition um, God and to show a high degree of purity and to abase yourself um, and in that fashion you can temporarily abrogate the powers of God to do something, you know. Um, and but a witch-based or pagan-based ritual magician, the first thing they do is do a Godhead assumption. They do a draw on themselves, like drawing down the moon or the sun,
Mhm.
and they assume a Godhead persona, and then they perform their magic under that guise. So, you know, some once in a while when I do this kind of magic, you know, I have this script in front of my face and all that. Okay, well, we're gonna, and then all of a sudden, bing, you know, the God is in me, and the God says, hey, you know, this ritual, and then something else comes out or something gets developed. Also, if I go off script or quote unquote make a mistake in the ritual because I have assumed the Godhead, it's okay. If I was a ceremonial magician, a real strict one, I might have to just banish everything and start all over again in a future time. So that's the difference. Someone who's doing ritual magic is really based on a kind of perspective of witchcraft or paganism, and and does not need to go through all of the processes that you have to go through in the standard grimoire type of magic in order to appease the deity before you steal his power and use it.
Beautiful explanation. Thank you. So, and the first words on your book, on this particular book, are elemental powers. So, are you bringing
Mhm.
regular elemental magic, the corners, the air, and the fire, and the water, and the earth? Because that's what's on your thing. So, is that, I mean, we work with that in any of those kind of magic, sort of, right?
Well, but it's a new thing, really, at least in the Western tradition. In the Eastern traditions, the concept of bodily based energy, as well as a cosmic energy that you could also, you know, connect to, or you know, in the concept of prana. Prana is a universal energy, and prana is also in your body. That concept didn't exist in Western magic until very recently, until the Eastern traditions became unveiled and exposed to Western philosophy and adherence. I mean, people on the, for instance, a lot of the Eastern traditions, such as the traditions that are practiced in the various systems of yoga in India, as well as Buddhism in other parts of Asia, a lot of their incredible concepts did not come to light until, you know, the end of the 19th century, and even more so into the 20th century. So, I mean, and one of the main persons who did that was Blavatsky. Blavatsky, with her organization, the Theosophical Society, brought Eastern philosophy, metaphysics, and practices into the Western traditions. Because prior to that, um, if we're talking about, you know, the 16th century or the 17th century, the basic belief was that you didn't that human beings in and of themselves had no power. They were powerless, and the only way that you could achieve and get any kind of power whatsoever was basically to find a spirit and see if you can make that spirit into your familiar. So a witch who has a familiar spirit, and I'm not talking about a cuddly little kitty cat or something like that. I'm talking about a spirit, um, and that you could essentially achieve a familiar spirit by you know. Connecting with the fairies. The fairies would offer you a familiar spirit, or, you know, if you were diabolical, you know, the devil could give you a familiar spirit, or you could just stumble across one when you're, you know, rummaging around the countryside, you know, looking for herbs and stuff. But needless to say, the spirit model of magic, which believes in that spirits have all of the powers and intelligences and wisdom far greater than humans, and will grant humans the ability to perform what they considered back in that time as something that was supernatural. The energy model of magic, which is what is in the book you are holding, that did not get developed until the 20th century. Although the philosophers of Greece, including the Pythagoreans and Empedocles, they all worked with something. We don't exactly quite know what it was, but Empedocles came up with the concept of the four elements of fire, earth, air, and water that we work with today. But he definitely had a methodology and a mechanism for using them, but you had to be initiated into his system of philosophy or become a Pythagorean initiate in order to be taught that. And when Christianity finally dawned upon the Mediterranean area, a lot of those practices were lost. About the only thing that was out of the philosophers that ended up coming into the Western purview through the Christian church was the monastic system of meditation. So discursive meditation is definitely something that was picked out of the practice of the philosophers, and the rest of it was dumped.
That's fascinating. I love it. And I love this history going on. So if somebody's going, okay, this sounds interesting to me, for a lot of reasons, like I want to go off book when spirit guides me off book, whatever their particular practice or belief system is.
Mhm.
Um, I like that you have like charts and guides and kind of I don't know, it's not the wheel of the year, is it? You have folk magic, solar lunar mysteries.
What you're looking at
What am I
there
looking at? Yeah.
is not the wheel of the year.
Oh,
It's an 8-pointed magic circle. Lots of witches are familiar with the four cardinal points for the four cardinal directions. But in the system of magic that I work with, I use the in-between points as well. So you've got instead of north, south, east, and west, then you have the northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest. And if you really wanted to be, uh, let's say, get into more greater details, if you work with a globe, then there are 16 points or directions because that's based upon the winds.
yeah. I'm not overly versed in that. I learned a little bit of that when I was working with Griffin Ked, a very traditional a British tradcraft, and we got into all the 8, not 16 sides of things. But this, so if they're going, well, I'm new to a path, or I don't even know what path it is, or I think I'm this, or I think I'm that. Um, so you kind of developed this yourself from what knowledge you had. Are you,
Yes.
what do you suggest that somebody does? If they're going, wow, I want more magic in my life. I want it. I like this path.
Here's the deal. All these books that I've written are not for beginners, and I apologize for that. But to be honest with you, there's so much stuff out there right now that online that you can go and you can buy books, you can go online and get information, all that. What I think is important is that somebody build up a tradition for themselves. Now, maybe that means them that they would join a coven, or if they're not into that, maybe they would have a group of people who they can get together with and they trust. And because that's going to be important is if you have a group of people who you're going to start sharing magic with, it has to be people that you really trust. Um, because what happens in that circle is going to be definitely confidential. And it's confidential because if you talk to other people about it who weren't there, that wouldn't make any sense. They would, think, oh, you're kind of nuts, or, or that's pretty fantastic, or I don't believe you, or gee, what kind of drugs were you taking, or something like that. Um, but you have to build up a knowledge base, and that would take maybe 2, 3 years 4 years. So, and this practice would be working with, the cycles of the moon, the S spots, and the seasonal celebrations, the 8 Sabbats. Working definitely with drawing down the deities that you are aligned with, doing a dedication for yourself to those deities, doing a self initiation of some kind. At any rate, over this period of time, developing up a practice for yourself that you can basically work almost, from memory. Setting and consecrating your magic circle, and doing a full moon mystery rite. I mean, just that kind of stuff should be just basic to you.
Okay.
Because when you get to that point, then you're going to be like, okay, now what do we do? And that's when you're not going to find material out there. And that's what all my writings are for. It's for the people who have achieved a mastery of what's out there, and they are now interested in basically working with more advanced techniques and ritual abilities. Now, the book that you are holding is based upon the energy model of magic, and the energy model of magic assumes that what you are working with are going to be consisting of forces and different types of energies, and they will be categorized first and foremost as the energy that is raised from your body when you perform rituals in a contained area like a magic circle. When you're in a magic circle and all of that, and you are exercising or dancing or doing whatever sort of bodily repetitive movements that you like to do, whether it be to music or whatever, you're basically raising energy. And the simplest way of raising energy that we were taught, a long time ago, back in the 70s, was the witch's dance, which went clockwise, or DSL as it's called, around the circle, faster and faster and faster, with a high priestess in the center of the circle, focusing the energy. And generally she'd have a sword and she'd be holding it straight up into the air. And when people would achieve a certain level of frantic effort, she would say Haraya, and everyone would drop down immediately, drop to their knees on the floor. And the energy that would be released from their body would be this spiral cone of power.
Yeah.
Because it's being directed up by the sword of the high priestess or priestess or whatever, the person who's standing in the center with the sword. And so that is the initial state where you generate that energy. And of course, what you need to do next is, now that you've got the energy there, you need to imprint it with something, a desire. You want to make something happen. And then there's a second dance, which basically has a similar sort of pattern, except it's shorter. And this time, when everyone falls down at the end, the high priestess will direct with her sword the power not straight up, but out, generally to the northwest, which is the witch's gateway. And it will go out into the mundane world and have an impact based upon the desire that would set it. So that's just energy. Now, if we want to qualify the energy, that's where the four elements come in, because now you're taking this nebulous sort of energy and then you are naming it, you're qualifying it. And so you can qualify it with one of the four elements, air, water, fire, earth. And then you can further qualify it with, an element base with an element qualifier, and then you have what is known as an elemental. Not to be confused with the creature elementals. No, it's a different sort of thing. Although they could generally be symbolized by the king, by the four elemental kings. But basically, you can qualify the energy, and you can actually qualify it one step further, and that is you have the four elements, and then you have the 10 attributes of deity from 1 through 10. And those 10 attributes, which the Kabbalists would call the 10 Sephirah, but which the Pythagoreans would say is the 10 primary numbers, you can basically qualify the energy to come up with 40 qualified powers, as I call them. So you've got like fire, and then you've got one of the attributes, like let's say um, number two, which represents kind of like a dual concept of self and other, and that's exemplified by fire. So it could represent inspiration. But I have all those meanings for all of those types of energies broken out in the book that you can contact, and the rituals that you need in order to work with them, and the tools and the concepts and everything that you need is all in that book to work with the energy model of magic. Now, this is the advanced energy model of magic, because the simple energy magic is just the cone of power. But when you start talking about, like, for instance, we were talking about the cone of power goes, DSL, sunwise, and you have the polarities of all of the people who are dancing, holding hands, but they don't meet. They have this sort of distance between them. So there's this polarity and excitement that's going on. And when they raise the cone, and then they have to do a second energizing dance in order to send it out, what you're looking at is very much the male sexual cycle. Mm-hmm. The arousal, and then you achieve a certain plateau, and then there's the final energy release, and ejaculation, as it were. That's the male sexual cycle, and of course, so all these witches are doing the male sexual cycle in order to raise energy. But the question that hit me when I was young and early into witchcraft was, well, what about the feminine energy? And so, if the feminine energy is the polar opposite of the masculine archetypal energy, because we're talking about archetypes, we're not talking about human gender. Right. I need to get away from that. What we would basically call, well, we could just name it off. Okay, so if this pattern is that you're going DSL, well, the first thing you would do is going Widdershins, right? So now instead of going DSL, you're going Widdershins, and instead of having this distance, this enticement without the reward until the end, you will draw the quarters together, and then you will have a walking the vortex, Widdershins, in a spiral going into the center. And then basically what you'll have is a container, a black hole like negative container that will contain all the energy in the magic circle. And this container can now continue to be filled with layers and layers and layers of energy until you finally release it. And when you release the energy this time, instead of this bolt going off like it does with the cone of power, you would basically have instead waves of energy, sort of like a woman's orgasm. It's waves. It's not like zip.
Right.
And but the vortex is such a radically different concept for working this kind of magic, because of the fact that it's a container. So it can contain the magic. You cannot banish it. What you end up having to do is to seal it. So, there's invoking spirals, and then there's a sealing spiral. So we got the 4 different spirals that are listed in that book. And the sealing spirals, what you would do to the quarters where you had anchored the points, the vortex. And then there's other structures that you can use. Instead of a cone of power, you can have a pyramid of power. And that would be where you would basically join the 4 watchtowers together into a square, and then you would have it pointed up at an apex, and you'd have this pyramid structure, which is the square joining the circle, which is supposed to be impossible geometrically, by the way, but it represents the fusion of masculine and feminine energies. It becomes then a generator of polarized magical energies. So, and then there's more then there's more complex structures after that too, such as the pylon. Pylon is basically a line in space, and you can set a pentagram to the bottom of the base of it, and an invoking pentagram, and then you can set an invoking pentagram to the top, and then you draw them together with a ceiling with an invoking spiral. Sorry, and voila, you have a pylon structure. You can put those pylon structures to the 4 watchtowers, and that means you can also work with 2 aspects of energy mixed together, because you could set the base pentagram to one element. You can set the apex pentagram to another element. So you have all of these possibilities. And when I was, starting out in witchcraft and all that, none of this stuff existed.
No, this is fabulous. Again, I wasn't here in the 70s, but I did come in the 80s, and I'm reminiscing of so much pre-COVID of circles and cones. I was like, when's the last time I've dropped in a big group? But yes, we have a lot of new people in my listeners, but I have a lot of advanced people. I actually have a school that has 20 teachers of all different, slightly different faiths and belief systems. You should come teach at my school. I'm just saying. But so somebody's going, I'm advanced, huh?
I could. We'll have to talk about that sometime.
We will talk. Yeah, we will talk. It's called University Magicus, and we have all sorts of wonderful and very different. We don't teach the truth or a truth. We teach many truths. But anyway, so this is one of my more advanced people. They know the practice. They know the holidays. They know so they get your book. Now, do they have to go create themselves a group? This isn't like solitary of doing this.
Actually, what you're holding in your hands is solitary. You do not need a group to work the magic that is in here.
That's beautiful.
All 3 of those books that are now out in print are all for a solitary working.
No, that's amazing. So tell us a little bit about your other book. I work a lot with talismans, and I like about sigils. So tell us a little bit about the other beautiful jewel tone books of yours.
Well, I guess the question should be, what is a talisman, right? Well, the other systems of magic, the advanced energy working, and the spirit conjuration, those are 2 different ways of working with magic. Spirit conjuration is the spirit model, and assumes that the spirit has all of the powers and knowledge, and that you are just a focus for that spirit. And then the energy model assumes that there is a universal energy as well as an energy within your body, and you have to raise that energy up in your body in order to connect to the universal energy, so that there's a resonance and an alignment that occurs. And each of these 2 types of magic are basically set up so that there's a specific thing that you want to do, a desire that you have, that you want to make that occur. And you work this magic, and either with the spirit model, the spirit, and you develop a connection, usually referred to as a pact or an agreement, or you work with the elemental energies to set something in motion. And in fact, in the book that you've got, there's 3 examples of people doing that towards the end of the book, hypotheticals. But the book on talismanic magic, on the other hand, a talisman is a completely different thing. Well, we talked about how elementals are a base element being qualified by a base element being qualified by a qualification element. So you have an element of an element. You have air, fire, earth, of water, that kind of thing. Well, a talisman starts out with a combination of a planet and an element. So, for instance, can you imagine what Venus of fire would be like? Real passionate, right?
Yeah.
Venus of earth would be kind of, naughty, earthy. Taurian, very much. Venus of air would be, the love of beauty, of symmetry, and the ability to, to appreciate art, or the ability to make art, for instance. So this gives you an idea that you've got 7 planets. You've got, which are the 7 planets of the ancients, and then you've got 4 elements. So that gives you a combination of 28 possible types of energies that you're going to work with. So you've got this element energy, and on top of it, you've got a planetary intelligence, and they're fused together so that the planetary intelligence has an energized body. And then this construct is projected into a metallic piece of jewelry. And that jewelry then resonates with that energy. And you put it into incubation for 72 hours. And then after you are done, you have a talisman. And a talisman, you're going to basically choose what exactly you want to do and how you want it done. And you're going to be basically picking which one of those 28 that you want to do that with. We call them talismanic elementals. And so you've got this piece of jewelry that has this energy in it. You can wear it on your person, or you can keep it in your house, or however you want to do it. And that talisman or piece of jewelry is basically pulsing out with its forces 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, forever, to meet whatever need you have basically planted into that piece of jewelry. And can you imagine what it would be like if you were to make 4 or 5 of those? Let's say one to help your career, one to help your love life, one to, you get the idea. So you
Yeah.
got all the areas of your life, and you've got these talismans that are all working on it, and they're working on it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no other kind of magic anywhere that will do that for you.
No, I mean, I've worked with talismans in the simplest
Mhm.
sense, but not like this. This is fascinating. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh, I'm looking at time. Okay. I am so intrigued. Now I have to get all your jewel tones. So, okay, one more spirit conjuring.
Pardon?
Your other book, your Onyx book, the spirit conjuring. So that's
Yes.
going the opposite direction.
Yes. This book, basically, these books represent what is not in the Book of Shadows and is not part of standard witchcraft magical technology. And so basically, the whole idea, the whole first step to becoming gifted at conjuring spirits is to gain for yourself a familiar spirit. However, I define the familiar spirit as something a bit different. To me, in my theological beliefs, everyone has within them a god or a goddess.
Me too.
In fact, some men may have a goddess within them, and some women may have a god within them. I don't believe that the outward gender of an individual, whether it's determined through their own sensibilities, or whether it's genetically determined, will actually have that too much to do with the god of your head. So you need to find out who that deity is that's inside of you, and that represents part of the search of this book. Once you identify what that entity is, then you need to develop a magical ritual specifically to draw down that entity into yourself so that you and that Godhead are fully consciously aligned. And once you do that, and once you've established that, then from that moment on, you will be expected to give offerings and votive offerings and other types of services to that spiritual being who really is representing your higher self. Because here's the idea, and this is kind of really neat, and that is, our minds, our bodies, our ego, all of this stuff is based upon the fleshy bodies that we inhabit.
Yeah.
And that means that they are all impermanent. That means that, who you identify with and how you've lived your life and your life experience and all the rest of that stuff is perishable. When you die, that will pass away. People will remember you, people will honor you, or love you and miss you, and that will be represent part of what I would call, your beingness as you've transitioned into death. But the part of you that is permanent and the part of you that is immortal is the deity that is within you. And if you can get to know the deity within you to such an extent that there's a perfect conscious rapport between you and it, then you will also end up becoming knowledgeable of the gods, the level of the gods themselves, and even beyond the one.
Oh,
So that's what spirit conjuring is. And of course, once you have opened the door and become aligned and connected to your higher self, as you're familiar, then that opens up the entire world of the spirit, and you and that Godhead aligned will be able to walk into the spirit world that is associated with the natural witches circle and be able to perceive and experience and have adventures unlike most people would even believe. I mean, I started that kind of path when I was a child because I was very precocious. I could hear and talk to spirits, and people thought I was nuts, and and maybe they were a little right. I don't know, but the thing is that all of the stuff that I basically picked up and developed beyond that is very much a part of this. And here's the thing. The great witches of antiquity had a familiar spirit, and were able to talk to the ghosts of the departed, and to find out anything that needed to be known, as well as to make things happen. And basically, that is something that's missing. It's not in the Book of Shadows. There's not a lot of training and teaching that goes about it, and it's all in this book.
oh my gosh, and I need that one too, because I've talked to spirits since I was a kid too. Crazy, yeah, all of the above. So I played in that world. So this is fascinating to put some structure to it.
Yes, that's the key, putting structure to it, because I'm a Capricorn. That's what Capricorns like to do. But lucky for me, I have Cancer rising, so I'm not really a stick in the mud.
Okay. Oh my God, you are fascinating. So tell my beautiful people who are now all intrigued where they can find you, anything you have coming up, where they can get your books.
Well, I'm writing. I just finished writing and submitting book number 4 in this series. And that one is called Sacramental Theurgy for Witches. And what that means is that witches normally, when they have their gatherings and all of that, they do, if they perform the draw, someone assumes the godhead, and then they bless cakes and wine, or ale and bread, depending upon what tradition you're into. And so what you're looking at is a very simple communion type of ceremony, but you can extend that considerably. And so I talk about these things. I talk about making amulets, for instance, that are blessed with the Godhead. I talk about using the sacraments of the bread and the wine, and the oil, and the luster water, for purposes of magic. I talk about a magical mass and a magical benediction rite for witches. And I talk about. Have you ever seen the series Robin of Sherwood? That was sort of 80s. You've
No,
never seen Robin of Sherwood?
I don't think so, but I'll have to catch it.
Oh,
I'm going to have to go on
Patty.
old things right now. Is it good? Do we need it for my witches movie coven? We have this.
Oh, you sure do. It's
Oh,
a
okay. Write that
series.
down, Rob, producer Rob. Okay.
It's a series, but it's Robin Hood, except Robin Hood is the hooded man, which is kind of like the man in black in the old tradition, or old craft tradition.
Yeah.
And His lord and master is a unknown man who dons the headdress of Herne the Horn God, and who lives in the Sherwood Forest and is able to see the future and the past and can wield the powers of light and darkness. Because as witches, we are into wielding the powers of light and darkness, not just light, but also darkness.
Yes.
It is both part of the equation.
Yeah, like yin and yang. So that's a TV series? A TV series?
Yes, it came out in the 80s. It had
Okay.
Michael Freed in it. If you remember Dallas.
Yeah.
Real handsome looking guy, you know.
Okay. I'm so intrigued. All right. So yeah, that book you have coming out. Where can people still find you and find these books? Website, social
I have a
media.
blog which I produced articles, and right now there's over 400 of them. And that's Frater Barrabbas, all one word, .blogspot.com.
Frater Barrabbas.
And there are almost 500 articles out there, and a lot of them are quite long. I talk about all of this crazy stuff that's in my books and the stuff that I do. I have an author's website which just tells you, you know, what I'm working on and what I'm doing. I don't update it very often, but the blogs do get updated. You know, I can come out with about 16 or 17 a year. There was a period of time when I was working on my day job, and so I wasn't able to get out and or do as much writing. The last book, which I'm just now finishing up, is called Transformative Initiation for Witches. And that book basically talks about the scripted initiation rituals in witchcraft, including ones for fourth and fifth degree and the mysteries associated with them, which is not in your Book of Shadows.
No.
It also basically talks about transformative initiation, the actual psychic transformations that we can go through. And these are part of two different cycles. One is the cycle of the hero, or the hero's journey, as it's known. There's a literary hero's journey. And then there's the heroine's journey, which is different. And in fact, I would advise anybody who's listening, who's really interested in the woman's cycle of initiation, or the what we would call the heroine's journey in terms of the literary cycle, to go and check it out. There's some really cool books out there and some information out there that is just now starting to come out in the last few years. There's a woman called Maria Tatra, and she came out with a book that's called the Heroine with 1001 Faces, sort of to be opposed or in addition to Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces.
Right.
But the 17 stages of the hero cycle and the 5 stages of the cosmogonic cycle match up to the 22 trumps of the tarot. And so the tarot is the key to transformative initiation. It has within it each of the stages that one passes through in this process. And it also has the most powerful symbols of transformation that C.G. Jung used to talk about. So, you know, these 5 books are going to basically come out, and they will represent everything that isn't in your Book of Shadows, and anything that you might want to do, with you by yourself or with a group. You can take either approach. The sacramental theurgy for witches, that one does talk about things like Godhead personification and making the drawing down the moon an objective reality instead of being extremely subjective, and also being used sometimes, unfortunately, for coercing the coven. If the high priestess is the one who is assuming the goddess, you know, would you go against what the high priestess says if the goddess is backing her up, after all, you know? So at any rate, that's just, some of the things that I'm working on.
Oh, that is fabulous. You guys check out these books. I'm sure they're available or will be available everywhere, the ones that are out. This one I know is Llewellyn, so they're probably all Llewellyn, perhaps.
The only one that isn't is this one right here. If I can,
Ah,
there we go. It's called, I call it MARM. It's Mastering the Art of Ritual Magic.
beautiful.
And it has everything in it for you to basically develop your own system of magic. Just shy of the book that you've got in your hands on elemental powers for witches.
I am so intrigued. I cannot wait to go to bed with this book. So thank you, Frater Barrabbas. You insightful. I'm sure my people are listening or watching to whichever they're all going. I need to know because this is something very new to me. So thank you for bringing this out to our world. I'm fascinated beyond anything. So you guys look him up. We didn't get we got your blog spot. We didn't get anything else, but you can find you, right?
Yeah, and Patty, if you ever have any questions about anything and all that, just send me an email. I'd be
I
more than I get crazy emails from people sometimes, you know.
believe me,
But
you will be hearing from me. Rob will give
but
your email direct and we'll talk.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you so much for bringing your amazing magic to the witching hour. Thank you, Frater.